this morning I woke up at 4:18. And I heard the title of this message. You that are watching by internet, you need to listen. It's a prophetic word. At 4:18, the Lord said, tie yourself to righteousness. Let me say it again. Tie, T-I-E. Tie yourself to righteousness. When my husband awakened, I said, oh, honey, God spoke to me this morning, and I don't even talk like that. It's not in my vocabulary. I might say we need to bind ourselves to doing something and committed to doing something right. But what the Holy Spirit said to me, tie yourself to righteousness. I looked up the Greek word, and bear with me if I pronounce it incorrectly, but I wanted to know what righteousness is. And the pronunciation is digasune, Greek word. And I said, okay, Lord, show me what it means. And what it means is right standing with God, morally and heart acceptable to God. Now, I could get into a larger definition of it, but I won't. I'll just say, right standing with God. And the Spirit of the Lord said, this is the hour that is going to make a difference in your life. What you do right now, the commitment and the stand that you make at this very hour is going to influence the years that are ahead of you. Tie, bind yourself to righteousness. I think Pastor Andrew, he probably preached one of the greatest messages, several things he said, even last week. And it was on Paul. And he talked about how that the believers, after Paul had been stoned to death, dragged out of the city, and that it was thought that it was then when he had a revelation of heaven. He was caught up into paradise, he shares. And so many theologians believe it happened at that time. But Scott was looking at his Bible, which breaks down the Greek, following along everything that Pastor Andrew was saying. And he pointed a word out to me. It says the believers stood around Paul. They agreed. They were praying. And it was a very interesting Greek word, kava, and it means to bind together, perhaps by twisting or to collect, to look patiently, to tarry, to wait on, to wait upon. Let me read that again. To bind together. The Spirit of the Lord said it is time the church binds together in agreement, to wait upon, to look. He will not put you to shame. Who looks to, waits for, hopes for, and expects Him. And so I'm looking at that Greek word, and then I'm thinking, wow. They refused to accept anything less than Paul being resurrected. He had been stoned, dragged out of the city, left for dead. Do you know, when they prayed, a miracle was done. God said this is the season for miracles and breakthrough. The hour has come. The moment has come. It is a time for your breakthrough. That which you've been waiting on, that which you've been looking for, it's getting ready to happen before your very eyes. And I looked at that and I said, God, I love verse 20 of Acts 14. And it was that Paul gets up and goes back into the city. Whether you like the candidate that is running right now for president, one thing that I recognize is bravery and courage when I see it. When he stood to his feet and said, fight, 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 there was cold chills that went down me. I said, it's a principle. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done. But if God will see you get back up and you'll say, I have a fighting spirit. I'm not going to lay down. I'm getting back up. Paul got back up on his feet, but he didn't just stay outside the city and say, oh, woe is me. They're going to stone me again. Do you know what he did, sister? He got up and went back into the city and walked around. I'm not dead. I'm alive. My God is bigger. So I'm looking at this, and the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me. And he said, if there ever was an hour that you need to stand for the Bible. See, our democracy is in danger in our country, and I'm speaking to a lot of Americans today. God is wanting you to open your mouth. Psalms 107, verse 2, let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Now, I'm going to tell you something. One of the things that I have seen has been mockery. In a time when there should be no mockery, don't stand for it, whether you're for him or you're not. Don't you dare stand for it. Even with President Biden, the mockery that has transpired is a shame, and it is a disgusting thing to me. My mother died of Alzheimer's. It is not funny to me. Even though my political choice may be different, I'm not going to point my finger at him, mock him. And I'm telling you, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. And I hear the Lord say, I want to anoint your voice today. And when you come into the company of one that is throwing darts, mocking, ridiculing, he says, I'm giving you an opportunity to stand for right. And what you do is going to make the difference in the years that are ahead for you. The Lord reminded me of when I was 14 years old and I was in a garage. And I was actually in a carport with the cutest boy that was in the high school. Honey, sorry, you're cuter than him. God outdid himself. But he rode a motorbike. And I had a girlfriend that was in the garage as well. And he thought it was really cool to say, I'm not a Christian. She did too. And I remember my heart beating out of my chest, even though I wasn't born again till I was 15. But I had a Pentecostal grandma that used to lay me on her lap and pray in tongues over me. Take me to Sunday school whenever I was there with her. And I remember my heart beating so fast. And I knew I had to stand for what was right. See, I had to stand. And I remember looking at both of them and I said, I am a Christian. And I wasn't. But something happened the moment I said it. There was a sealing, something that I'll never forget. The Spirit of God came on me. And what the Lord said to me, if there ever was an hour to stand for what is right, it is now. I was looking at Numbers 14, and if you'll put that up there, I think it's one of my favorite passages. Not my favorite, but almost one of them. Numbers 14. If you have your Bibles, you can turn to Numbers 14, 1 through 10. Numbers 14. I know that we are having challenges right now, but it's going to arise. Let there be light in Jesus' name. Let's see. Praise the Lord. I know my son texted somebody today and said, make sure. I think it's just, we've been having challenges. How many of you know about the things that are going on technically speaking right now? Blackouts. Joshua Giles prophesied there is going to come blackouts, power outages. And guess what? He's right. There has. All right, I'm going to turn to Numbers 14. Okay, good. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and people wept that night. Look at verse 2. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness. I want you to notice that they cried, they wept, they spoke against leaders, against Israel, against who had founded Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who had selected Moses and Aaron. This is the truth. I have never seen such confusion, fear, and anger that has gripped this nation. Not only this nation, but also families that are in this nation. House divided against house. Church against church. And notice that it is nothing new. And it says in verse 3, and wherefore has the Lord brought us into this land, to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, they came up with a plan, not a God plan, but they wanted to dispose of Moses and Aaron as the leaders. And they said, let us make a captain and let us return into Egypt. They were not in the plan that God had for them. There was not a flow. They were willing to go back to slavery, to a lack, to a position of Lodabar, like Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, It says, when they said this, I want you to notice the reaction of the leaders. It says, then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces. They didn't go into a back room before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. You say, what do we need to do today? We need to fall on our faces and cry out unto God over the division that has taken place in our country. Standing for what is right. And it says, and Joshua the son of Nun, I like that. There weren't nuns back then, but Joshua the son of Nun, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, tore their clothes, rent their clothes. And they spoke unto the company of the children of Israel. I want you to notice what they did. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to be tested. God would have you to know that this message is so important that you will be tested in the days that are ahead and in the weeks that are ahead. What you do is vitally important for your future and for your household, for members of your family. Caleb and Joshua stood between the congregation and Moses and Aaron. Tie yourself to righteousness is what the Lord said. They stood up between the people who wanted to stone Moses and Aaron. They were 2 of the 12 spies. They were the ones that brought a good report and said, we're well able to take the nation, to take the promised land. The 10 spies brought an evil report. And the 10 spies said, there's giants in the land, and I don't think we can do it. And the word says Caleb and Joshua stood up. Wow. I said, God, what are you saying? My brother called me. And he said to me, Carol, will you make a stand? I said, I don't really get political. I said, I vote, and I have the right to do it as an American, but I don't get political. He said, but if you hear a voice, I said, brother, if he's like Martin Luther King, I will stand up and make my voice known if I hear a certain cry. As an American, I will do it. I have exercised my right to vote. If I'm asked, I will say, this is who I'm for. Because we as Americans should be able to talk. And he said, would you stand if you hear a voice? I said, brother, I have not heard the voice yet that can rally the people. But I said, I will stand, and I will make my voice known. And on Saturday, when I saw a brave and courageous man say, fight, 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 I said, okay, I choose. I will make my voice known. I choose to stand. And I said, I will stand with whatever party says no abortions, pro-life. I will stand no evil material in the schools that are perverting the minds of the children. I will stand. And so I said, okay, God, this is my choice. You have a choice. And I'm not telling you to stand the way that I am, but I'm saying you have to make a decision that is well thought out and studied. Yes. And so here I was. And I had said to my husband, I said, honey, I said, Winston Churchill, let me give you a little bit of history. I feel that I'm supposed to. I said he was a man that was called for the hour in the 1940s when Belgium had fallen. Not only when Belgium had fallen, but the Netherlands and France was getting ready to sign over and make a deal with Nazis. And the British Isles was getting ready to be taken. They called upon a man called Winston Churchill, 65 years old, smoked cigarettes, had cigars, and he had a bad temper, and nobody liked him. And he would have been the last one that even the king would have chosen. And yet somehow he became prime minister and the minister of defense. I looked at that. He was robust. He was overweight. He breathed heavy. He had nothing that appealed to anyone. When he spoke, he had a lisp and he was a stutterer. And the whole House of Commons turned against him. And the media had turned against him. And so the Lord spoke to me through his life. And he was to address the House of Commons. They were saying, make a deal. If he had made a deal with Hitler, then Nazism would have prevailed even through to the West. He stood. Do you know what he did? He went and got on a subway in England. He was supposed to be at the House of Commons to speak to the Lords at 9 o'clock in the morning. Instead, he told his chauffeur, he said, drop me off. And he runs and he gets on a subway. He meets the girl and he said, how do I get on this? How do I pay for a ticket? Here he is dressed in black with a black hat and a cane. Everybody knew who he was on that subway. Every race, every culture, every color was represented in that car, from the eldest to children. And he sat down in a subway car, and people were like this, mouth open. What are you doing? Why are you here? He said, what? Have you never seen a prime minister get into a subway car? And he said, I'm going to ask you a question. What do you want me to do? Now, I'm going to tell you something. Our country has become more tyrannical in some of the decisions that they have made and have ignored the wishes of the people. But I heard a call and it said, fight, fight, fight. Paul said, fight the good fight of faith. Whether you know it in the scriptures, we are militant. We're called to be soldiers. Endure hardness as a good soldier. This is not about political. I know some of you just kind of reared up and said, oh, she's trying. No, this isn't about political. I'm not telling you how to vote, but I am telling you that you need to stand up and say enough is enough. The children are being taken into bondage and human trafficking. They're being mutilated. Their minds are being perverted with the material that is presented to them in the schools. What are you going to do about it? You have to stand. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. If you have been redeemed from the hand of the enemy, then say so. Winston Churchill, he said, what do you want me to do, Brits? Because he had been so defied. Even the king had come to him, didn't like him. The king was going to leave England. And Winston Churchill said, do whatever you think you're going to have to do. But I am standing. And while the bombs fell on England, there was a man whose voice came over the radio with a lisp and a stutterer that boosted the morale of the English people. His speeches are today so famous that I hung one on my wall. Never, never, never quit. He didn't show up to the House of Commons until after 3. Supposed to be there at 9 o'clock. He didn't show up till after 3. His speech lasted from 3:40 to 4:14. And I want to read you what he said to the House of Commons. And I think this is extremely important. He said these words. He said, "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." I would ask you a question. Have you surrendered your children to the will of the enemy? Have you surrendered your finances? Have you surrendered your church, the schools? Have you surrendered? He spoke these words and many more for the space of about 30 minutes. And they gave him a standing ovation, the man who had been hated. And the one that opposed him the most actually was an ambassador to the United States. He ended up returning after the speech. And this is what he said. "I have never seen a nation go to war with nothing but words." But the words that he spoke were ordained of God for that moment. And he had the bravery and the courage to make a stand. And because he made that stand, you and I are living in freedom, because it was the turning of the war at that very moment. A chubby little man that smoked cigars and had a bad temper, had a lisp, and was a stutterer. Let me read. When he would come on the radio at night, the English people were waiting for his words as they were being bombed, sometimes several times a day, buildings destroyed. And this is what he said: "Never give in. Never, 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 never. In nothing great or small, large or petty. Never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense. Never yield to force. Never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat." In a matter of 6 minutes, he laid the policy to wage war. And this is what he said: "By sea, land, and air, victory at all costs, victory in spite of all terror, victory however long and hard the road may be." I was reading Ezekiel, and he said, if there is a trumpet sound and you pay no attention, he said, the blood will be upon your own head. Then he said, but if you will listen to the trumpet sound, I am not talking politics. Oh, Carol, sure you are. I am talking your decision, your commitment. I'm talking right now for your stand in the United States of America. You cannot look one way and turn your head from what is transpiring in our nation. It hasn't been easy. I was a pastor of 2 churches. Do you know there were times that people would come to me and I'd counsel them? Do you know that there were times they were wrong and I had to make a stand and tell them, you are wrong? And some of them walked off and they left me. But I did the right thing in telling them something's going to have to change. We are at a but in our families, in our schools, in our cities, in our communities. And what you do is vitally important. Winston Churchill heard the cries of the people. They said, fight, fight, fight. Don't give in to tyranny. I listened to what I was reading about Winston Churchill. I listened what I was reading in Numbers 14 with Caleb and Joshua. They went against the tide. They weren't popular. In fact, in verse 10 of Numbers 14 says the people turned from Moses and Aaron and they were going to stone Caleb and Joshua. You take the risk of being hated. You take the risk of losing friendships. You take the risk of being mocked and ridiculed when you stand up for what is right. But you don't know. Oh, yes, I do. Oh, yes, I do. I have wrapped my arms around people that were hated in the church and restored them to their proper place. I've had a whole board tell me that I was doing wrong and that I needed to get strength about myself and that I needed to cast this couple out of the church. I went to the Lord in prayer, and I said, what am I to do? And he spoke to me. He said, love is strength. They have taken the easy and weak way out, but love stands and puts your arms around an individual and say to them, I'm going to walk the mile with you. And you're going to live. And you're going to fulfill the purpose and the plan of God that is upon your life. Never, never, never quit. Yeah, your sister's not going to like you. Your brother's not going to like you. Your father's going to tell you you've gone off the deep end. Because you stood up. But Carol, I think the best thing to do is not open your mouth and everybody will love you. No, some of us need to go down to the school board meetings. Some of us need to make a stand and say, this is wrong. Some of us need to go to the courthouse and say, I'm with you. I stand with you. Actions and words. How do we fight? Jesus said his voice was not heard in the streets. Is it about making mayhem in the streets? No. One of the things that Martin Luther King did, he led a peaceful march. Your words are powerful. The power of life and death is on your tongue. Your words are powerful. And I will close with this because I want to pray for you. I want to close sharing this with you. Tommy Ariomi, how many of you know who he is? Prophet out of Texas. Awesome prophet. Actually lived in England for many years. He said, we're headed for some difficult times. He said, not even Trump will be able to solve all the problems. I was listening to Joshua Giles speaking about shortages. You say, what's going on? Open your eyes. Did you know that Austin Wealth, the company, took out a bunch of puts, which means they were betting on something happening to former President Trump? Made the news. Took it out the day before because they would have been very wealthy people if he had been assassinated. Andrew said, and he's one of the greatest prophets, Pastor Andrew. He said Jesus appeared to him. And he said, there's coming a revival. And he said miracles were done in a stadium. Miracles done. But I'm going to tell you how it's going to be done. And what's going to pave the way is when we stand up for what is right and let our voice be heard. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Did you know that Paul, when he was strapped down by the Romans, he said, is it lawful to scourge a Roman citizen? What did he do? He stood up for his rights. I hear the Spirit of the Lord today. I hear the Spirit of the Lord today saying, educate yourself. What is transpiring in this nation? I am constantly studying. I talk to people that are of a different persuasion than I am. You say, well, what do you talk to them for? Because I want to learn from them. I want my eyes open. I want my ears open. I watch news in other countries because I'm responsible for what I say and what I do. I hear the Spirit of the Lord saying, what you do right now. I'm not talking tomorrow. I'm not talking next week. The decision you make, the commitment that you make to say, I'm going to study, I'm going to educate myself. I'm not going to take every wind of doctrine that comes my way. I'm going to be more involved. I'm going to pray for the children that are being sex trafficked and taken at the border, whether you know it or not. Hundreds of thousands are missing from the border. I'm going to educate myself. I'm going to open my mouth in some way. Caleb stood. Joshua stood. And it comes down to the principles of God, His Word. And I hear the Spirit of the Lord saying, I'll be your business partner. Tie yourself to righteousness. Let your voice be heard. But you don't understand, my daughter's going to get mad at me if she asks me a question, and if she says something and I speak up and say, no, that's not the way we need to speak. That's not the way that God would not be pleased at that. You don't understand. It'll cause a rift in the family. I'm going to tell you, I'd rather have God's pleasure than I had a member of the family. So I'm not talking about who you are to vote for. I'm talking about you educating yourself and standing up, whatever it means. It may be voting. Whatever it means, I want you to stand to your feet. Some of you in here, the Lord just spoke to me. He said, you are an unlikely source. Justice Winston Churchill, according to the world would have never chosen him. The beautiful thing about America is we have freedom of choice. That's the beautiful thing. But those choices are being threatened. And I've stood by and watched it and watched it and watched it. As I have to watch what I say on Facebook. Because if I say a certain word, then the algorithm will not be so great. Whoever thought that we would live in America? You say, well, I don't like hate speech. Well, then you need to tear up the Bible because there's plenty of hate speech in it. You're kidding, Carol. Why do you think they're wanting to take out certain scriptures? What did the Lord say in Proverbs 8, verse 13? Hate the things that I hate. Pride, arrogancy. Don't teach your children that hate is a bad word. It's not a bad word. Their hate needs to be directed to injustice, to evil, to wickedness, to pride, not to a person. But Carol, don't you think there's too much violence going on? The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. Endure hardness as a good soldier. Put on the whole armor of God. You better fight for your family. You better fight for your loved ones. You better stand in the gap. You need to awaken and cry out to God for them. You need to cry out. I want you to lift up your hands to the Lord right now. And I want you to be sincere in your prayer. I want you to cry out and say, Father, forgive me for not standing when I should have stood. Forgive me when I hear something wrong and I do not speak up. Forgive me for not fighting for my nation, for my church, for my community, for my school, for my children, for my family, for the Christians. I watched a Brit. He said 3 things have happened since the assassination attempt. He said confusion. He said fear and anger. And he said, people, I'm scared. I couldn't believe he said it on national television in front of millions of people. He said, because Christians will be the next target. Why? Because this world's gone crazy. They don't want you opening your mouth. They don't want you to have a different opinion. Then that's how this country thrived. It was on different ideas and different opinions and reaching across the table and making peace. He said, anger. I've seen so much anger. I just heard the Lord say, I'm the righteous judge of all the earth. I just heard the Lord say, I will bring justice. But you may not be happy the way that I will bring justice. He said, but stand back, brace yourself, and know that I have heard and I am coming down to rescue, to set free, to deliver, to set prophesy right now, you're getting ready to see teams raise up. They will go into dark places. Children will be rescued from the hand of the enemy. Those that are being trafficked. I heard the Lord say there's going to be a reversal of the mutilation of the children. I heard the Lord say, and my word will be placed back in the schools. It will not be taken out again, says the Spirit of God. I have heard the cries of my people, and I will move in your midst, and there will be a move of God the likes this world has never seen. And it will only be for a season, saith the Spirit of God. For I am coming. I am coming. I am coming.